do you mean by your words? You are at a higher soul level compared to your actual soul level, but you have zero control over the seduction of the ego conscious for that soul level, where your actions will take you to hell. How did you judge that I will go to hell?
Because your actions away from submission, which God wants for such level.
Okay, so what do you mean by soul level?
I will tell you. But you have to promise me to stop your mind thoughts streaming. Just watch the thoughts coming, so it can fade away, and bring your awareness and attention here. Just stop for a moment and try to be with me now. So that I can explain it to you.
Okay, I get it. Please proceed.
Well, my friend. What makes you alive is a form of spiritual ethereal energy. And when you die, this means that this form of ethereal energy has disappeared in one dimension, and will appear in another dimension. We as unique identity formed out of number of combination, part of us is the spirit, which is a form of a dimensional supreme ethereal energy, that is the immortal part of us as it is part of God. We are charging our spiritual energy wirelessly, when we sleep from one source, that leads us to God as He is spirit unity. So one of God presence is the of supreme spiritual energy, that is unique, and shapes the world around us. It is difficult for us to study this higher spiritual ethereal energy, because it is intangible. But we can only feel it, because we are part of it, and it is surrounding us.
Wait. Really, I feel more confused. Can you explain more?
God has spoken to us since the first day of human being history, and from His words we can understand a lot, as He wants us to know parts of the creation story. The following is the story as you have started to notice, so listen. God is goodness, and through His speech to us, we notice two words, a speech of anger, and another of love. So it is easy for us to notice that goodness as a supreme spiritual energy can be either spiritual energy and quality of love, or spiritual energy and quality of anger. It can be noticed that God was first in the direction to translate the spiritual energy of goodness as a unit into spiritual levels, and then translate those spiritual levels into names. So that each level can be defined by names for the spiritual energy of goodness, common in all levels but with a different strength of those names from one spiritual level to another. Those names were in the quality of love, and in the quality of anger, but all names are good names. So each spiritual level will be defined by those good names with special strength different from level to another, which has mixed names of love and mixed names of anger, where at the highest level there be only God, who has the ultimate awareness, and He who made all those levels, which look like as they are part of Him. It can be noticed that later God may made each spiritual level become number of spirits, which are united, but have no awareness or conscious, so we were a thing, but in the same time, we were no thing, while God is ultimate, who is in supreme awareness state and supreme will, and who has the supreme names, which called God names, the best names, in which there is no partner He has. So we were all parts of that spectrum united at a different spiritual levels of this higher ethereal energy strength, and we have no conscious.
Well, please wait. Can you give me examples of what you call them, good names in anger quality and good names in love quality?
Well, we'll define the names together later. But keep in mind again, that the names of anger and the names of love are in common for each level, but have a different level of strength, that makes each level different from the one above, from the bottom to top like the pyramid. But, to maintain your mental focus, I can give examples for both names of anger and love. So as an example, justice requires a certain power of goodness spiritual energy, but in the character of anger, and mercy requires a certain power of goodness energy, but in the character of love, and so on. For this reason, some have a higher strength of justice energy than another, and the same with respect to mercy. Hope that you understood the difference.
Now I think the fog is fading, and I think that island's glow is starting to appear.
Good news, that means you are starting to see. Can I continue?
Yes, please.
Well, now we have names for good, and in levels of strength differs from bottom to top like a pyramid, and we exist as spirits in this state without conscious forever, where God at the highest level of awareness, who has absolute power, and at the highest energy strength. For that he is perfect and has the best names. It can easily notice that once the names were determined, justice and mercy appeared as one of the good names that God commanded and applied first to himself. So his will was in the direction to apply justice and mercy at all spiritual levels. So he may have decided that every spirit needed to experience ego and awareness and free will, where all will have free will to define their new, immortal spiritual levels, while they are in a complete consciousness state, and after that live an immortal life with such new level of awareness and ego, and free will at a certain level of spiritual energy strength, while they are in the presence of God the greatest. Therefore, spirits will experience awareness, and through free will. Spirits will choose either to keep the strength of names unchanged and thus keep their level the same, or choose to change the power of names and preserve consciousness. That is why God defined himself as just, as God will allow those who choose to experience awareness and ego to improve their spiritual levels to become conscious, so that they can enjoy awareness with a high level of strength for those goodness names, where heaven will be their eternal home near God, and where they will be aware of the names of happiness, which they will experience with absolute feelings.
But how could this happen?
In a temporary life or existence, called the worldly life, where they will experience full awareness and ego of their actual spiritual level, and will have a free will to determine their own new spiritual level of goodness by their own freedom, through time. So time must be created which will determine the years and months during which they will interact with events, and with each other, people who belong to different spirit levels. This interaction with events and people is designed to test their ability of controlling awareness and ego, and test their energy strength of their goodness names in every aspect of life, to identify new immortal levels that will be chosen by them, and thus achieve the first goal of worldly life. The second goal is to learn to be both aware and in control. So they need to learn to control the existence of their new, but immortal consciousness is must, where every time they increase their energy strength level, they need to learn how to control their new awareness in such new level, which most time is seducing. So later when they return back to heaven they can act well by praising and worshipping God, while existing in their new immortal presence near God with complete awareness and free will. For this purpose they need to learn how to worship God and praise him, and follow his guide and instruction in the worldly life, while they are there with their own free will, to demonstrate control and self-discipline, and show commitment to obey God, whose actions are not questionable, and his free will is absolute to do what he wants. The third goal is to know and experience and test the names of happiness. To understand the feeling of those names, so that when they return to heaven, they can feel absolute happiness that was tested in tiny, but now in heaven they will become fully aware of happiness forever. But wait, do not jump to conclusions. There are still many details that need to be explained about spirit levels and our being in the worldly life, and how to compete to have new soul level. Returning to our story, as we concluded that each spiritual energy level will be conscious and become soul and become ready to set its soul level, the following actions logically must happen as they are necessary. First, all spiritual levels will have freedom to choose their own new soul level of energy strength, but this can only happen if they have complete free will and awareness, which as a result, if not controlled wisely, will create the opposite of the names of goodness, and in different levels of strength, where energy structure for those names is different, which have been corrupted with new mixture of love and anger energy, which wasn't exist before. So new dark soul levels will appear, which will create new immortal levels of energy opposite to the original one. So a new pyramid will be created, which will be a reflection of first one, with opposite names that did not exist before. This pyramid will accumulate by mistakes and darkness as a result of awareness and free will. So new darkened names will appear, where sadness also will start to be in existence. It is easy to notice that these names were not created by God. But it is a consequence of the fact that spirits are conscious and has the ability to control its good name's energy structure to new level either positively or negatively, which has its own seducing ego. Once these spirits have free will, this free will with ego can be tempting and difficult to control and may create opposite names with different strengths equal to their current level of energy. While God, when he is the only presence with awareness, the dark names are impossible to occur because the structure and the strength of God's good names energy is complete and perfect. Logically, this new immortal pyramid must be in a new location, so hell was created, as a result of which it will be their immortal home. Also, hell must exist and become immortal to be as a warning to those who will live immortal life with ego, free will, and awareness, to good behave in God presence. Otherwise, from time to time someone will misbehave, which will make God's wrath is required. Like what was happened with Satan, and also with Adam, as you will know later. So for that awareness or conscious, free will and ego become huge responsibility, as the consequences will be harsh. Since consequence is huge, it is easy to conclude that God's justice demands to give a choice to each spiritual level to choose to live the worldly life with such ego and awareness, which may be so tempting for most of them, and may generate sadness, so they need to understand consequences such as benefits. It's easy for us to conclude that for God to be more just, a sample of earthly life need to happen, in which each spirit will witness the outcomes and be aware of his choices when time comes to take decision for experiencing the really worldly life. Through this understanding, they either choose to keep their level unchanged and lose consciousness again, but save themselves from hell and sadness, or choose to preserve awareness and proceed with a worldly life and try to have better immortal soul level, which may later be in heaven at new levels of conscious and experiences great immortal happiness and joy. So the worldly life sample was created, where for the first time spirit pairs were created to be spouses for the purpose of mating and experiencing in this worldly life, and after the worldly life, the two souls will unite and return as one soul again, united by a soul connection, so their choice and destiny is same. Although they will lose the soul connection in the sample worldly life, which will be the reason to make each to look for other in the worldly life to feel perfect and to be united again with their soulmate, which rarely happened, as the purposes of creating spiritual pairs is to create the need feeling of spouse and get mating, even if they are not spirit souls, and even if they don't complete each other spiritually, which is part of testing. But as mentioned above, in end the spirits pairs will be united again. So limited number of spirits pairs, which has same destiny and choice, and which are with different levels of goodness named spiritual level, chose to experience this life, as they committed crimes, and could not resist the power of seduction of the trust, which is freedom, consciousness, and ego. So they chose to experience the opposite names, and create a high level of sadness and darkness, and at the end of that sample of worldly life, few made it and managed to get a new level of goodness. Satan May was one of them, who succeeded to improve his immortal level with good control of his awareness and ego. But later he lost that control of his awareness and ego. So he misbehaved, allowing opposite names or dark names to accrue in present of God in his heaven, and you know the rest of his story. As God has tested Satan ego by asking him to kneel to Adam, but Satan failed to do that. Later divine justice required to test Adam and his descendant for the same. That's why the worldly life should be designed in a way the testers, the people, will find huge differences between each other, where the purpose of this difference between them is to test their ego. So for those who couldn't succeed to control their ego and awareness, hell was their place, even if they have succeeded to improve their immortal soul level to new one which has higher energy strength. Now that this earthly life sample has seen the consequences, all of the spirits have witnessed how dangerous it is to choose to experience awareness and ego, and has free will to change their spiritual level, and saw the consequence of losing control of awareness in the worldly life that's coming.
Okay, I got hooked. What happened next?
It is noticed that after that sample of earthly life finished, which took time on earth, all spirits pairs, which has same destiny and choice, saw the consequences, so logically God decided that now the worldly life is must. So he spoke to the angels, who have a high level of good energy, and who may have already decided not to have free will to change their levels and surrender to God, who may decided to keep them as his agents, to carry out his will, so he has given them the power to do his will. God told them, "Indeed, I will make upon the earth a successive authority." They said, "Will you place upon it one who will cause his corruption therein and sheds blood, while we praise and sanctify you?" God said, "Indeed, I know that which you do not know." So it easy for any to conclude that God decided to be more just. So he opened a window to allow all spirits pairs to see the individual challenges and paths of their lives, and how these paths look very different for each other based on the fact that God will is absolute and he do what he wants, so they need to admit that if they are going to experience the world life. Then God led all spirits to see their place in heaven and in hell, so that everyone can imagine the responsibility of choosing to have consciousness to change their immortal levels.
Please go ahead. I'm starting to understand a lot of things that I didn't understand before.
Well, it is easy to conclude that, after all spirits pairs were fully aware of the consequences, each of them began to make a choice based on what they saw in heaven and hell. So some could not bear the possibility of being in hell and feeling compassion for themselves if they would possibly be in hell, although they saw their place in heaven and what they might reach to. In the end, they decide to keep their spiritual levels as they are and not to be conscious in the worldly life and keep in spirit. Others decide to go through the worldly life and choose to be fully conscious based on what they have seen in the heaven of happiness, and despite the truth of what they have seen in hell of punishment there. So they decided to experience the worldly life and go there, and chose to take the trust which is experiencing the ego plus awareness plus freedom, while proving the surrender to the following facts. First, that God will is absolute to do what he wants. Although they will find destiny and worldly life is so illogical, they need to prove surrender to the first fact, and also prove surrender to the second fact, which is to good behave, and obey God, and worship and praise him as he wants, regardless of the circumstances. So for those who chose to take the trust, all mentioned will be their responsibility, which they are aware of it, and they bear witness against themselves. Now for the ego plus awareness plus freedom, to present in the worldly life, a new formation need to present, where their spirit will be presented through souls, which is new formation. Unlike spirit awareness, soul awareness required to be evolute and required its own evolution journey through a suit called body, either a human body or a jinn body, to experience the journey of awareness, which is part of trust evolution, ego, awareness, and freedom. This trust will be given by God with default basic energy level, which for the first time the tester will possess. That is why trust evolution need to start from childhood to adulthood, and through those names control will happen to change their actual spiritual level, and their good names strengthen a positive way, or negative way. This increment will evolve the trust names too, and vice versa. Those who chose to go through the worldly life, God made them testify for themselves, telling them, "Am I not your Lord?" They said, "Yes, we have witnessed," so God gave them spiritual awareness to choose. In this first stage of awareness, each spirit chose its new destiny, so God let everyone die and returned them to the new life in a new form and body to experience the worldly life, and to experience their trust names evolution. So for those who decided to try to change their levels to new levels and took the trust, their spirit pairs will be presented as a soul pairs that will define them, and they will obtain conscious and tools that will help them to be at the highest level of consciousness, high level of the nervous system, brain, eyes, hearing and feeling. These tools will be their responsibility. So their choice to take the trust was based on passion for pleasure, and for that they were oppressive and ignorant, because they may return as reassured souls in heaven, or they may return as malicious souls in hell. And for those who felt mercy for the consequence of being conscious and decided not to take the trust, which is ego plus awareness plus freedom, and not to change their strength of goodness names, it can be concluded that God may ask them, their spirits pairs, to present on the worldly life with little awareness and new bodies that will be filled by their spirit pairs with their good names, which has their own special energy strength. Whereas for those who felt mercy for themselves for the consequence of bearing trust and decided not to take it, which is ego, awareness and freedom, and decided not to change the strength of their goodness names, it can be concluded that God may ask them, their spirits pairs, to be present in the worldly life with little awareness in new bodies that will be filled by their spirit pairs, which will translate their good names, which has their own special strength, to serve the temporary life circle through a very balanced ecosystem on Earth, and when time ends and after life, their bodies will be dust, and their spirit pairs will be united again, and return to their old levels. This is the end of the story for them. So those spirits pairs will appear in life in the form of mountains, trees, rocks, all kinds of animals and birds, and all other forms of life except man and jinn. Those forms of life know their prayers and exaltation because they are still aware of God greatnesses. But for those who have taken the covenant as trust, which was limited to God, trust for them is a necessary need to allow them to be able to experience complete freedom of choice, where the majesty and the greatness of God must be withheld from them so that they can freely choose. Otherwise, if they keep aware of God greatness, they will find themselves by force worship God, even if they have freedom to do so, and they cannot make any kind of free choice even if they want. You can understand the greatness of God by thinking about the consequences of the freedom to think and choose. While there is a possibility of doing and speaking stupid things about God in this very short life, compared to immortality without punishment, then the outcome of this short and temporary life, either in heaven or hell forever. Let me repeat that for you again in other words. Eternal consequences of a short life. This certainly fits with the greatness of God. In order for God to be more just and before man descends to earth, God may decided to give the first lesson to make people learn the second goal of their new existence practically. Do you remember the second goal that I mentioned before?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
Well, just to remind you, I will mention the second goal again, which is to control the existence of their new but eternal consciousness and ego. So when they return to heaven they can act well, by praise and worship God in their immortal presence near God. So the first lesson about why they needed to worship Him in the worldly life, and why they need obey Him. For that lesson, human being who would descend from Adam and Eva, and then descend from others, they need to understand Adam and Eva's story in heaven very well. God created first spirit pairs representative of the actual worldly life Adam and Eva, and made them live in heaven. And made them aware of Him, and asked them not to eat from the tree. But guess what happened? They disobeyed Him, despite their awareness of His greatness. And as a result of that sin, the greatness of God must be hidden from Adam and his descendants. So they must learn how to control their eternal consciousness, and praise and worship God the way He deserves, even when they cannot see God.
Well, now I really feel like I can see the new island. It's really very clear. So when do you think we'll get there, and what do you think we'll see there?
I still think you need to get more clear image before we reach to the new island. So when we get there, it will be easy for me to explain things there. So when I call things by their names you will feel the change. Let me finish my friend the story and don't feel bored. So after we conclude that God gave the first stage of consciousness to all souls, to allow them to choose. And after some chose to take the pledge of trust, which is ego, awareness, and freedom, to experience the worldly life. And after the first lesson, God let them all die and live in the worldly life through the process of birth in a new physical form, where the spirits who choose to take the trust become human souls with a second stage of consciousness, freedom, and ego, which is limited only to them, and need to start to evolve from zero level, from childhood to adulthood, as mentioned before, while moving from one soul level to another, where these names were only limited to God, while others have zero level of those names. So relatively it will start from zero level with them, in which trust will be in control of other spirit names, and in the same time, take its strength from spirit name strength, and vice versa. Other spirits who decided not to take the covenant as a trust, they become spirits for everything around us with a limited awareness that includes being aware of the God greatness. So that's why they know their prayers without the need of messengers. Also, as awareness is new to them, it need to start from zero level too. For us, since the majesty and greatness of God will be withheld from us, so we will not be able to see him or feel him. We need messengers from time to pave the way, after overthinking, to remind us for the consequences of having trust in the worldly life. Although after life we will be open to the fact that we have chosen everything that we have been through and testified for that knowledge.
You mentioned the messengers. I always wondered, most people may go to hell if they become polytheists and didn't follow God's instructions and worshipped and praise him the way he wants. Then why messengers didn't came to every nations? Why some nations have messenger and other not? Why there are some nations in Amazon and other places who are living in isolation where they don't have messenger? How those will be questioned for their actions if there is no messenger to get them to the right path?
First, as you have noticed, we mentioned that we have chosen to take the trust and experience awareness. So we already responsible in front of God for our choice, especially that we have witnessed that he is God. So there is no chance for us to ignore this responsibility. So it is act of mercy that God send messengers, and it is a great mercy that he didn't send messengers to all nations. You know why? Because human nature necessitate most of the time to disbelieve the messengers. Human being has demonstrated their nature more than one time, and once God messenger disobey and disbelieved, then God greatness necessitate to exterminate this nation. So imagine if all nations have a messenger, then all need to be exterminate. But instead God send messengers to some nations, who later disbelieve and become polytheist, then God exterminated them, to show other nations the consequence of not following the messengers. Few nations followed God messengers, however later their descendant misunderstand, and become polytheist. Also, God select from time to time one nation, to be God messenger to other nations, till the time this elected nation, misrepresent God message, and twist it, and become itself polytheists. Then God replaced them and select another nation and so on. In the end the last nation was selected, to become God messenger to other nations. This selected nation had last messenger, who we will talk about later. So the selected nation, its role and duty is to get other nations and convey God message to other nations, and make an argument on others. So for this nation members, any failure deliver God message to other nations, will be accountable, and as consequences they will receive punishment. In the end for people, the rule of thumb regarding receiving God message, is that the more they know about God and God instruction, the more punishment will be. If God disobeyed, even if they achieve better soul level improvement.
Well, please wait, I'm starting to get confused. You're starting to use terms like soul, spirit, and trust. Please explain more before proceeding.
Well, we, who took the trust, are immortal spirits, which is unique form of ethereal energy, and in different level of strength from each other, and have new unique awareness convenient to that level of energy strength as explained before. So, we will not be simple spirit as before. But now we will be more complicated, instead we will be soul, which is trust plus spirit, where trust is ego, awareness and freedom. So in worldly life and as a consequence of our choice, for this spirit pairs to function well in the new dimension, a new arrangement must be set up. This new arrangement is intended to help them achieve their actual goals, which has been explained before, to obtain this new eternal higher spirit level, and at the same time experience life. The new arrangement will help your spirit to translate your spiritual energy into actions in the worldly dimension. Think of it as an astronaut suit. Without it the spirit cannot live in this dimension, and your soul will leave this space as well. If the astronaut suit is destroyed, or it has a problem, the same thing will happen to our body. When our body gets damaged, soul will leave it, and for this reason we need to know our body system to know how to survive. But keep this idea for a while, we will work on it later. I will become yourself, your soul. Later after experience life, your soul either will become reassured soul or become malicious soul. So you will never return as a spirit like the one who decided not to take trust. Instead you will return as soul with new level, either reassured soul or malicious soul. So you will have a reassured soul if your trust is under control and committed to God's command and way of behaviors, and committed to prayers and praise, as God wants not as we want, and then to raise your goodness level while ego submitted to God. Or you may have a malicious ego or malicious soul where your subconscious mind controls your actions, and your spirit of perception awareness is not in control. So your mind and ego will be controlled by the media, society or the environment, as well as your actions, where your spirit of perception will be captive and suffer from wasting time on unimportant things, while day after day you are reaching to the time of your death and still not achieving any new levels. Instead you lose your original level and become more and more a malicious soul, which is why we need to increase our consciousness and direct our ego by using our spirit of perception to the right path of worship God and improve our spiritual level with a clear plan.